Well, good morning, everybody. We'll get started here shortly. Just seeing who shows up for a Christmas week Project Wildfire meeting. Might be a smaller group, but that might be better discussion. So if you don't mind, in the meantime, just introducing yourself in the chat, name and affiliation if you have one. That would be helpful both for our notes, but also we have a guest that normally doesn't join us that we'll be introducing later today, Laura Handy. And again, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Okay, well, a couple minutes after, so Boone, if we're ready to go, I think we'll just kick it off. Thanks for the introductions, folks, and thanks for joining us, realizing that we're just a few days from Christmas, so Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and probably more timely that today is actually Happy Solstice, so we're headed back towards longer days, and springtime will be here before you know it. So thanks for joining us. We have a typical December meeting planned. Typically in December, what we do is go over and just kind of try to reflect back on what we all collectively accomplished working together here through Project Wildfire. So Boone's going to run us through that, as well as the typical kind of check-in on if there's any questions or revisions on the past minutes, and a regular program update. Then we are going to spend a little bit of time from Laura Handy, who is looking for maybe a discussion or input on the Oregon Conservation Corps program. And Laura's with the Heart of Oregon Corps. And we'll get into more of those details a little later in the meeting. And then we'll save a little bit of time if anybody has things to share. That's the kind of overview of the agenda. So with that, I'll hand it over to Boone, and you want to kind of run us through a program update and anything like that.
Yep. Yeah. So pretty busy year this year. Oh, it is not moving for me. Pretty busy year. Right. I guess I threw this slide in there just because it just kind of reminds us of the overall mission as we're thinking about what we did over this last year and how we align with it. I'm not going to force you to remember. Oh,
you're still on the agenda.
I did not switch. It switched on one screen, but not the other. There we go. Okay. There's the agenda. I mean, the mission for Project Wildfire. So as we kind of go through today, just kind of keeping this in the background of our minds, what we're kind of focusing all of the work around and how we're accomplishing that in various ways. The kids are crazy this morning. Hopefully everybody's all right with that. Okay. So last year we went through, I'm going to start off with the steering committee. You know, last year we ended up with several new seats on the steering committee, and then we still have a couple of them held open. Actually, as I look at it right now, I see that I didn't get this completely updated where I have Ken still listed for Tom. Apologize for that, Tom. I meant to have that updated. But we still have a position open with the insurance agency. And then we also have an environmental community member open. And of course, you know, we don't just go out and search for I shouldn't say that. We don't just take anybody for those spots. You know, you guys all here are people that have a passion for wildfire. So we hopefully we find somebody that fits that bill for both of those positions. Okay. So the highlights of this last year, we're going to run through all these things, but we switched over to our constant contact, our monthly newsletter. We're doing a somewhat monthly, trying to make it that way. We did our home mitigation strategies classes. We had a materials update that we did. We'll discuss fire free briefly, dive into our Firewise communities, talk about our Cwpp revisions. Some of the story maps is another tool that we use this year, so we'll dive into those a little bit, and then finish with talking about the grants that we had over the year and the ones that we're looking at for this year. I didn't make a slide for the constant contact, but I'm just did want to touch bases on it because it was a new way of us communicating, Project Wildfire communicating to folks. In the past, we've always done the just an email from myself, and those worked well. But the constant contact has enabled us to put a little more content in there and then draw a little more attention to some of the things that we want to discuss and highlight. So hopefully, folks have appreciated that. You know, the monthly updates, kind of having that consistent format, and then also when we're able to getting out those newsletters that we tried to time around kind of fire season and what we should be thinking about, talking about with our communities. It looks like the slide is not, oh, there we go. So our wildfire home mitigation strategies classes, similar to the ones that we did in 2020, we kept them virtual again this year. Last year we swapped them over to being virtual from a full day down to a 4-hour day. And these were great classes. We did 2 of them, one in April and one in May. And we recruited the help of Ariel as well to help us put these on. But we did the 4-hour class, both of them virtual, like I said, but we recorded both of them, and I tried to take the better of the two, which kind of splitting hairs, but I took one of those classes and I did put it online so we could have that. Let me see if I can copy that link in case somebody wants it. I'll throw it into the chat. I wouldn't watch it right now or anything, but let's see if I can do this while I'm talking. Okay. And then that takes you to the video. It's a 4-hour long video. So if you're planning on watching it, just be prepared. It's going to be pretty long. I mean, in all honesty, I have a hard time making it through an hour-long video at times. 4 is a pretty good one, but I think, you know, if you follow along, you can break it into chunks and just do the sections as we do them. And so you're not biting off more than you want if you're interested in checking those out. So good class. Overall, planning to likely do those again this next year. Materials update, if you remember, right, thinking back last year, this was in process for a while, but we were looking at all of our handouts and our brochures and trying to figure out, like, well, what is the next kind of needed piece that we should be thinking about. A lot of the stuff that we had was aimed around, you know, spreading the word of what Project Wildfire is and who they are. And then we were beginning to kind of look at more of like, well, if we are interacting with our community, what is the next piece that they need to be thinking about? And that's our defensible space, right? And what are we communicating out? Because we've somewhat become that household name and across Deschutes County for the most part. Not saying we're not still spreading the good word, but front and back of these, and we did this in a couple different ways. We see if I can copy this one too. Oops. We have these as a trifold that you can pick up here at the county office, and I'll put those up front whenever people want them. We got thousands of them available. We've given out quite a few of them from our first initial order, and I think we're about ready to, we did order a second batch, so we have another good amount of them. They've been pretty successful. It's pretty simplified kind of view of what you should be thinking about for defensible space. I'm going to put that into the chat also here. So if you're wanting a PDF version that's printable, printer friendly, that's the link I just put in there. It's a little better for printing. You don't waste all of your ink and stuff, and it's a slightly different view, but the same content is what we have here. Those have been pretty successful. I've been actually pretty excited to see how much people liked them. As soon as we got these out, there's requests for hundreds of them at a time. So I got a lot of them spread out there, and several boxes we went through this year. And then fire free. As we remember, last year we extended fire free, and then this year we continued with that theme, extended fire free through pretty much all of May and into the first part of June. And then we offset some of those dates so that we were able to kind of handle that workload, which worked out quite well. It was pretty awesome to see the participation that we got across all of the areas. So last year, we if you look at this chart from 2019 to 2020, we basically doubled the amount of debris being brought in during that time period. In 21 was very similar. We pretty much doubled that number, just shy of doubled it. And also the same with the, when you look at the totals for 2021 spring and the total for the fall 2021, whoops, I see a typo in here. The cubic yards that was dropped off was slightly down from the previous year, but it was very slightly. If you think back to the spring event, we had one of the weekends was marginal weather, but also one of the weekends was Mother's Day, which I thought was kind of funny. I was thinking about all the moms that were out there cleaning their yards and taking debris in. I couldn't think of too many of them that were probably doing that. But the numbers dropped a little, and I actually contributed to likely people were busy with other activities that weekend. And then the fall ended up with quite a bit of marginal weather this year. I think it was raining pretty heavily on a couple of the days that the fall event was happening.
Yeah.
So not too bad on the fire free, though. It's been quite successful. And then of course we got a lot of people that participate. So I just kind of wanted to show the list. We're not going to go through it, but the list of folks that participated out there that are volunteering or helping to spread the word, or at least we're making contact with and talking to. And since COVID started, a lot of the participation from everyone across the board has kind of stepped down a little bit. However, from 2020 to 2021, things were beginning to kind of pick back up, where people are starting to emerge again and starting to figure out how to interact with all the COVID precautions in place. So as an example, the Fry Rear, that site, in 2020, we had Heart of Oregon up there, just one or two people, but no one really assisting. They were just mostly there counting cars and taking a tally of what was going in and out. And then this year, we kind of reemerged with the fire departments, the rural fire departments, Cloverdale, Bend Fire, Oregon Department of Forestry. All those folks were back out at Fry Rear again. And they weren't actively, for the most part, they weren't actively helping to unload vehicles, but they were there and participating and getting a lot of handouts out, answering questions and helping where they felt comfortable with helping. So hopefully next year will be one more step back, closer towards a sense of normalcy for the sites. For some reason that didn't pop up. There we go. So Firewise Communities, we're always talking about, I've said this many times before, so apologies if you've heard me say this, but right whenever we have a fire in Central Oregon, we're usually thinking about the wave of interest that pops up after we have that fire. Because, when you think about it, in Central Oregon, we pretty much evacuate a community every year. So we're constantly reminded of the threat of wildfire, and the risk that we hold out here. So every year, whenever we have a fire, we think of the wave of interest, and then we kind of try to ride that wave the best we can, grab the interest while it's there, and then keep people motivated and moving along. And after the 2020 fire season and those fires at Labor Day, the interest really went up, and especially as we went through the winter and came back around to fire season, those Labor Day fires were in everyone's minds, and communities began to really take interest in Firewise, wanting to know more about it. And I'll get into a little bit more, but along with becoming Firewise, we had those grant funds to actually reduce fuels out there, which are heavily welcomed, of course. But with all those communities, I mean, when we look at the list, this list is 15 communities that became Firewise this year. That's a lot, right? It's pretty busy. We have 15 communities that are became actually Firewise recognized through 2021, with 13 more of them in some stage of the process, whether it's at the very beginning of just getting their assessment done to right on the edge of resubmitting forms or submitting the final application for recognition. So that's a total of 23 communities over this last year. I think there's only a couple of them that we held over from the previous year that had assessments done, but myself and Ross Huffman with Oregon Department of Forestry, the two of us were busy this year running around from community to community doing assessments and getting those taken care of as fast as we could, getting people the material they wanted, just trying to take care of or take advantage of all those outreach and educational opportunities that we had. You know, at our Firewise communities, I feel like I can't say enough for them, because they do a large portion of the responsibility of being prepared for wildfire, right? It's everything from the landscape scale stuff all the way down to the individual resident. And that's where they fall in, is that community and individual resident doing their part of the bigger picture. So it's pretty cool to see how much they are getting done and accomplishing out there. I don't know what else I wanted to say on that one. But I did want to show this list. I got two slides that kind of compare where we're sitting, right? So if we look at this list, we jumped all the way to 58 communities, with the last 57 and 58 are pending right now. So their applications have been are partially done and waiting to get the final approval right now. But we have 56 communities that are currently recognized. And when you compare it to last year at the same time, this was the list I generated for last year's December meeting. We were at 40 with one of them pending. So quite the jump. Quite a big jump in community participation. And in that, right, we're going through this last winter, Ed and I began to talk about just that momentum and how busy we were with running around doing the assessments and how much interest it was generating and how cool it was that all these communities were doing the work. And we thought, well, we need to recognize folks and try to keep everybody engaged. You know, in years past, we always did I shouldn't say we always, but we've done workshops and stuff, coordinating between those communities, kind of sharing successes and how to work through some of those struggles. But we also thought, well, we're passing that 50 Firewise sites in the county. It'd be nice to celebrate that and maybe help to kind of build that sense of community across all those communities. So as we reached 50, we thought, well, that's something to celebrate. And we put together a short video for the for those communities, thanking them for doing their part. I'm gonna put that into the chat too. I got lots of links I'm putting in here. But yeah, we did the thank you video, which was pretty awesome. We sent that out to all of our cooperators, folks that are doing other kinds of work on the ground. You know, the Forest Service, I talked with Jeff Crawford. He does a lot of organizing of the fuels treatment around on the Chutes Forest, especially on the Bend Fort Rock. But he is out burning piles and doing kind of their piece in the WUI side, you know, the wildland urban interface side of things. And they're always doing their stuff. So he was out and he did a nice video thanking everyone. And that was really good to see kind of that whole spectrum. I guess I don't want to just call out Jeff. There was so many people that participated, but I really wanted to span that gap of showing like everything from the landscape scale all the way down to the individual resident, and then all the folks that happen or do a piece of that in between of fire preparedness. So rural fire department, Sun River did a thank you, Black Butte Ranch, Sisters Fire, and several others. So that's a cool video to check out. I really like that one. The top bullet there is that $1,000 that we, or $100,000 that we invested into our communities, which was pretty awesome. Ed managed most of that. I helped him quite a bit with, or I helped him some with selecting the communities as we rated those applications, but we put it out to the communities that if they're Firewise recognized or working on recognition, they're eligible for grant funding to accomplish some of those projects that they had identified within their communities. And that 100,000 came from approval from the Board of County Commissioners. So we thank you, County Commissioners, for the funding to do those projects. Pretty awesome to see how much was getting done out there. I don't have the match off the top of my head, but a lot of those communities were matching those funds, and some of them were more than doubling that match in their projects, which was pretty awesome to see. So big shout out for that. And then the last piece that I have up here is our Firewise Story Map. If you're not familiar with story maps, I definitely encourage you to check them out. Right, Story Map is essentially just a I could show it. I'm not going to jump into it, but the Firewise Story Map is just a nice way to display whatever content you want. But in this case, we talked through the Firewise communities, what it means to be Firewise, kind of who is Firewise within Deschutes County, what the projects are that are going on. And then within that story map are embedded maps that are interactive, so you can click on different communities and see what kinds of projects they've been doing or when they became Firewise. And if it was available, I added contact info for those communities as well. So if you were new to becoming Firewise or an interested community, this was a tool that I sent out to a lot of those communities to kind of check out what Firewise was all about, and also a way that if they really wanted to, they could reach out to one of those Firewise communities to ask questions about their program and what it means for them to be Firewise. So the story maps were pretty big to be able to kind of get that information out there. Okay. I feel like I'm talking pretty fast here. I was expecting to go quite a bit longer, but the Cwpp updates. 1 second here. I get feedback every once in a while. It's hard for me to talk when I do. Okay, so we were, oops. Technical difficulties, sorry. So Cwpp updates. As you guys all know, we have 7 Cwpps across the Deschutes County planning area. So there's a map of them there, but we rotate through on a 5-year basis of revising all of those. And this year was the Greater Bend Cwpp revision. Well, the Greater Bend turned to do the revision. So we pulled our partners together, began to kind of talk about that in, I believe it was April, May was when we began to consolidate some of the numbers. I mean, some of the names and the folks that would be participating as part of that steering committee as we looked at the Greater Bend Cwpp. So with that update, we updated all the accomplishments that we had across all of our partners, got those things updated, and that's 5 years of updates. We looked at some boundary changes in the southeast corner of Bend, and that was a good call. We had some of those lines went right down the edge of the private land and the Forest Service where they bounded together. But as we really thought about it, if you think about any fire, really, if it's within striking distance of a community, we should be considering that wildland urban interface. So we moved that boundary back a ways to include more of the federal grounds, to make sure that we were recognizing that those were still or should be considered wildland urban interface. So we do have homes and stuff that are very close to that boundary. So that southeast corner, we moved that boundary out ever so slightly to capture that. And we also updated our critical transportation routes. So we added in a map that shows them those critical transportation routes. You could also refer to those as evacuation routes for the most part. But those are the routes that we really identify as the things that we need to keep open and we need to be thinking about for moving folks around if we do have an emergency. We also use the Oregon Wildfire Risk Explorer. If you remember back, I can't remember which month it was, but we did have a presentation on that where we talked about the uses of that and where that came from. So that was the quantitative risk assessment, which was developed some years ago. They took that data and made a user interface, ODF, OSU, and US Forest Service together, made a nice user interface where you can pull out polygons, so areas, like the CWPPs and quantify your risk. So we've been using that across all of the CWPPs for consistency, so that when we're looking at one CWPP compared to the other, we're still comparing them on the same kind of basis, and it takes a lot of that subjectiveness out of quantifying the risk. So that was also used in there. What is the last one? Oh, the other thing to note with the bin CWPP is every year we've generally had some participation from the city of Bend. However, we've never, in the end, they've never signed it. But this year, I went before the city council and talked through the CWPP process, answered a few questions prior to the meeting as well. But right now, as we speak, that's going across to Mayor Russell for signature. So the city of Bend will be a signature to the CWPP this year. So kind of cool to see that that's happening. Thinking back, I think the CWPP was originally written in 2006, so it's gone through a couple of revisions, and this year we captured them. So next year, thinking about where we're headed to next, that'll be the Greater Redmond CWPP area. My hope is that we'll be able to start earlier than what we did with the Bend one. I don't have a clear picture of what 2022 will hold for us, but I'm hoping that we'll have some time starting in February to kind of pull together the list and talk about who is going to be participating in that and then start planning out our process. I do want to share one other thing on CWPPs. Move this over. So this is our Cwpp Story Map. Kind of talks through our CWPPs. You can click anywhere on any of these tabs and it takes you into the different sections of it, right? We can talk about the risk and look at maps. It'll take a minute to load, but the piece I really wanted to draw attention to is our CWPPs under revision. Of course, this doesn't load since I got Zoom running as well. Oh, there we go. We just recently added this because, as we think about our outreach and the ways that we've been reaching out to folks, we share the Cwpp Story Map through several different means, but also, we're always trying to make sure that people are able to participate in it. So when it comes to revisions, we added this section. What are the 8 steps to revising? Talked about which year these ones will be revised coming up in the future. So if you're curious of when your area is getting revised, there should be a map over here that's not showing up. You can find that along with the links directly to those CWPPs. Briefly, what's going on with the current CWPP that's under revision, and then what will be coming up next. Some of the pictures are showing up. And then if you're interested in it, this is the part that I like the most, is that we added a couple buttons in here, so you can click on those buttons and you can add yourself automatically to the email distribution list. So if you click on here, you can fill in your information. If you're curious of the Greater Redmond CWPP process or what's going on with it, you can add yourself to the email list. And then as I'm sending out updates, what we're working on, you'll receive those emails as well. So one more tool of reaching out to folks to make sure that we got the inclusion of everyone across the board, all the way down to our communities again. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to say on CWPPs. So grants across the county and grants that we've been involved with, I don't think I've got them all up here as far as all the grants that we've been working with, but we did have those discretionary funds that I talked about earlier that went to the Firewise Communities. Pretty awesome to see the amount of work that's getting done out there and the number of communities that apply for those grants. It's we don't really want people to be reliant on them, but also we want them to recognize that they are coming, so they're able to apply for them when we do have them open. So we had $100,000. I believe we dispersed those across 35 communities. And like I said earlier, they got a lot of match that is contributing to that as well. And I guess one of the things I also wanted to say with those Firewise communities is when we do have information and stuff that we're disseminating and sharing out to folks, those Firewise communities are a pretty big reach, right? If you think about 35 communities and that they represent 13,000 residents, and now I'm sure that number is well above that with the last few that just came in. But when we do send out an email of things like the grants that are coming up and available, we'll hit all those resident leaders. But generally speaking, a lot of those resident leaders are turning around and taking those emails that I'm sending and then sending those to the residents within those communities. So the potential is there that we're hitting thousands of folks at a time when we do send out emails, which is a pretty cool reach to have. So if there's things that we need to be sharing or something that needs to come through there, we can definitely chat more about that. And then the last one here that I've got on here, and I think there's some other stuff. I don't know if Ed wants to touch on some of those other ones, but is our Senate Bill 762 landscape resiliency grants. So Senate Bill 762 had several pieces to it, and one of those pieces came to fuels reduction for private landowners. I'll move a couple of things around here. So this month, we decided that we were going to go ahead and start going down that road. Let me just change this so I can see folks, because I feel like I'm talking to nobody this whole time, which is a very odd feeling. So we were, ODF had held their workshop to talk about the grants and kind of how they were going to share those out and how those functioned. And prior to that workshop, Ed and I were having a little bit of a hard time seeing how we were going to fit into that, whether it was going to be fully worth the effort to put in for those, because we just weren't real sure. There was a lot of unknowns about how that was going to work, what we'd have to administer, what we would or would not have to administer. So when they put that workshop on, it answered a lot of our questions, and we hadn't really heard from anybody as far as any interest in those grants. And right after that workshop, there was a couple of emails came in kind of asking like, well, what are we looking at to apply for? And then other folks were like, hey, I want to apply for that, but I'm not sure how I fit into this. How do I become part of that? So, we had a pretty good discussion, myself, Ed, and Ross Huffman, just how that would work out. And we decided that, even though basically the application period is open over the holidays, which really makes it really tough and it's a short window, we thought, well, let's see what we can pull together. So we've been working on just that, trying to pull together all of our partners for one of the, I'm going to open up another page here in a second to figure this out. We wanted to pull together all of our partners and make sure we weren't, it would be a disservice if we let this go by and we had people that had interest. So we gathered up everyone with interest, began to put it together. And as we were putting that together, the interest continued to grow and grow. So currently, let's see, I'm not sure where to start with this. I should have planned this out a little better. Maybe what I should start with is we began to talk with all of our partners, identified an area that we're interested in, identified what kinds of projects were on the table that people had identified already, kind of what they were planning to get done and that we were sure was going to get done. There was a little bit of feeling like, well, we don't want to bite off more than we can chew, but we also want to look at what's planned to get done and what we can really help out with. So I created, myself and Ross helped me as well, but we created this map to begin to show where folks are looking at work to get done. And when you look at this map, it's the green areas. Boy, that's way too small to read. But the green areas are a lot of those project areas that work's going to get done on the private side of things. There's some that aren't populated on this map yet. And we also wanted to show where work has been done so we could show that adjacency. So we end up with these red areas. But the overall planning area is combining the Joint Chiefs, the two Joint Chiefs projects that we've had. One is the Buttes to Basin that's up near the north half of Deschutes County and extends into Jefferson County. That's all of this area. That's the Buttes to Basin. And then we also pulled up that Joint Chiefs Greater Lapine Basin, which extended across the southern part of southern part of the county and into Klamath County across Walker Range. So pretty big landscape. So in the end, we end up with partners across U.S. Forest Service, the BLM, ODF. It's a pretty extensive list. ODF, Walker Range, the Soil and Watershed Conservation District, Upper Deschutes Watershed Council. Oh man, I will butcher it. COFSF.
Central Oregon Forest Stewardship Foundation.
Thank you, Ed. Issues Land Trust, Ben's Parks and Rec, and then we've also got like another good. OSU is not on this list. I don't have it written on my list, but either way, OSU has been part of that, and then we've got about 10 private landowners. So quite a few folks, and this was, you know, I see Patty Gentilomo is on here. She's one of our private landowners as well. That helped us to kind of identify some of the work that would be getting done and some of the stuff that was done in the past to show that continuity. These grants came with like it's a 75-25% match. So 75% grant funded, 25% match from the landowners. We looked at the, and these are also looking at like large scale stuff. So if you're in a community like a Firewise community, there's a different grant to go under than these, right? Than these ones here, but they still fall under Senate Bill 762. But those, that 25% match, we pulled in the federal partners. The federal partners have lots of projects that are happening. They're at the point where requesting funds for some of those projects in that short time frame doesn't really make sense to them. However, they do want to be part of this greater effort. So we pulled them in as a partner to show the match on a lot of that. So they're across this whole, our entire planning area. We're getting ready to ask for $5.9 million. And that's treating approximately 7,000 acres. And then when you combine all of the ask plus the match, and the total acres that we're looking at treating, it's substantially more. It's somewhere around $13.5 million with 54,000 acres being treated. So all that to say, right, this has been eating our lunch. Myself, Ed, and Ross have been putting in some pretty long days. Ed's technically on days off right now, but I think he gets up the same time as I am, and he's been working straight through the whole day, just like I am, pulling numbers together, working on spreadsheets, typing up narratives, and then I've been on the side of things of working out the map, and then Ross has been gathering up a lot of our landowners and talking to them and facilitating identification of a lot of these projects. And all of our partners are doing the same thing in the background, grabbing their projects, typing up their narratives, and then passing it to Ed. The way that this is going to work is that we as the county, we're going to basically just be the applicant. So we're facilitating that application process. And then when it comes down to the actual funds and getting it on the ground, those will be, for the most part, those will be individual agreements between ODF Salem and those partners. So they'll have their funding directly between the two. I could be butchering that a little bit, but that's essentially my understanding, the way that we've talked through this process. So pretty big one. I'm excited about it. I think it'll be pretty cool. So lots of things with Senate Bill 762. That's the landscape resiliency program. And we named our project Central Oregon's Shared Stewardship Landscape Resiliency Project. And then if you're within a Firewise community, this isn't necessarily a Firewise community process at all. I want to make sure I don't accidentally get folks wanting to talk to me about being part of this. And we're actually at the point where we really wouldn't be able to add another partner because of the tight timelines given the holidays. But if you're looking at applying for that in your Firewise community right now, or something along those lines, you're going to want to look at the Senate Bill 762 webpage. So I just Googled SB 762 ODF, and it's usually the top result. And then when you look on there, there's going to be a link to the Firewise Communities portion, and you can go right to that link, and then you can apply directly with ODF for those funds. I will not be a middleman. I think I've gotten plenty of emails asking, and it's rightfully so. That's usually what we're doing, is kind of the middleman with a lot of those grants, but we're not the middleman in those Firewise community grants. But if you have questions, I'll definitely answer them. Okay, so a decently busy year this year. I think that was yeah, that was my last slide that I had for the updates. It's I would like to have, there we go. Like to have spent a little bit more time kind of refining that presentation. However, with the grants, I put the things together and try to make sure that I grab the highlights for everyone to check out this year, to see kind of what we've been up to. Because it feels like sometimes we're working and no one's seeing what we're doing, and all of a sudden something pops out. And it's, and I understand that feeling, but at times that is the way that it works, just to get things done. But hopefully we're including everyone. And if there's something that you have questions about or something you'd like to be involved with more, definitely let me know, because I'm not against any of that. Before we jump over to Laura or anything, do we have questions? I'll open it up to Ed too there.
Yeah, I just invite any comments or questions. Typically, up until the last couple of years, our December meeting has been a little bit more interactive with folks adding to the conversation, and it's admittedly a little harder to do, but we do have a little bit of time set aside if folks want to add to or ask questions. Ariel.
Yeah, thanks for doing a whole wrap up of this year's Project Wildfire activities. I was wondering, since you were mentioning with the number of new Firewise communities that have been this year, if there was also any difference in, I don't know, how these Firewise communities came together, or there was something new that they did, or just anything,
Yeah.
to expand upon the fact that there's that many new communities.
Yeah, there was, over the last few years, NFPA changed some of the application process. And I think that was a little bit of a struggle as we all sort of sorted out how that works. A lot more stuff went online to the portal, and we were, and I think myself and ODF, and yourself included when you were working for ODF, we were still sorting out how that worked out. But over this last year, with having, I think a very big key piece to it is having somebody in that position that you were in. You were there very short and then transitioned out, and there was a whole lot of stuff falling kind of towards myself or people playing catch up as we're kind of working on it. And then having Ross in that position for some consistency and a place for people to reach out to has helped out tremendously. We also, Ross and I, kind of talked over some of the ways and the things that we're looking at in the communities, and even in FPA, we were at one time, there was an email conversation we had about like what we're talking to people about as far as the critical pieces around your home for dispensable space, and they asked if we talk about the 0 to 5, and we consistently do. It's every time we talk to a community, that is one of the biggest focuses of where it's at. So just knowing, not to say that we tell everybody the same thing, but knowing that likely this is where we're going to go, we have been able to kind of set up some templates to help folks out to kind of look at what we're talking about and make sure we're really bringing attention to those key pieces around their homes. And that's sped up the process of the application for us. There's been some changes to the action plans. Instead of just doing an action plan of these are loosely the things we want to work on, they've really identified, they really want communities to identify what they're going to do in the next 1, 2, and 3 years out before the next action plan is required. So that's been kind of fun to see that the communities are a little bit more motivated, a little more focused on what they're getting done. And that tied directly into our grant application that we had for those discretionary funds. That was pretty cool as as those grant applications were going out. Those communities were ranking higher that had their action plans all done because they had that focus on what needed to get done. So instead of communities always wanted to do just the hinterland. It's easy, even myself, I'm guilty of it. It's easy to point at the neighbors, say the neighbors got to get that done. It's harder to turn around and look at our own place and be like, I need to get this done. The action plan, I think, really helps people to look at their own place or, the greater neighborhood and identify what really needs to get done, and gives them that list of priorities. And then those grant funds tied directly to having an action plan actually focus them on getting those done. It's really, I think, promotes the preparedness and resiliency of our communities by having that stuff done and focused. I don't know if that answered your question. I felt like I kind of talked around it a little bit.
Ariel, I would add one thing to that, in that through, I guess, even early on in 2020, but earlier than that, we typically tried to kind of convene Firewise communities that would want to participate in a kind of overall Deschutes County Firewise network or exercise, or get them together for breakfast or whatever, but an opportunity to share between those. And that may lead into kind of our ask of this group or the steering committee between now and our January meeting is we typically try to get input on what we might focus on or adjust over the next year, and that might be something we want to try to reinvigorate over the next year with 58 communities on the list, making sure that those communities are aware that their neighbors are Firewise, or that they have contacts throughout this network of people that are willing to help or probably puzzling over the same issues that they are. So I made a note for myself that after not really getting that group together in late 2020 or through 2021 for obvious reasons and challenges, that we should probably look at some sort of effort to do that over the next year or so.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point, Ed. Yeah, because it'll be interesting to think about, okay, now that we have this many more Firewise communities, how is it going to be different than it was before? How can we really leverage the fact that there's that many more of them, that they can all learn from each other somehow? And because there are more communities, that it's likely that we're going to find some of them being creative and doing some activities in new ways or things like that. So I don't know, it'd be great to capture that and make sure people are learning from each other. So
yeah, before I know you got your hand raised, Greg, I'll jump to you in just a second, but before we do, just thinking on that topic there, Ariel, it's very true. Communities are all across the board of where they're at in that process. There's several communities that do assessments, and there's some communities that want to do assessments, and being able to bridge gaps like that is pretty big. Being able to have those folks know that a lot of those resources and a lot of things they're developing are already developed, and that they can reach out and kind of really tie those things together and leverage one another. And then the other piece of that I wanted to just kind of promote is that if everything works out right, and so far it looks like it is, but February we're planning to have Fire Safe Marin come up here. And I know a lot of people are like, California, but Fire Safe Marin, they've got quite the robust program down there. Pretty cool one to look at. Their communities are networked pretty well. Those communities have got to the point where they're a standalone. They kind of organize themselves and have bi-monthly meetings to talk about the projects that they're doing. And they also have some different chipping projects. Got some good chipping projects and stuff that they work on. So I invited Fire Safe Marin to come to our February meeting and kind of talk through their program as a whole. There's other pieces of that, but I think the Firewise part of the Fire Safe Marin is interesting too. I think what you just said is like, what happens now that we've got that many? Like, it's getting to the point where it's big. It's like it's getting bigger than just one or two people trying to manage it. I'm like, we can do it, but boy, to be able to network and have those folks be able to lean on each other sure would be nice. All right, sorry, Greg, go ahead.
No, that's great. One thing I was going to say was the fact that I know with the Shoots for Woods, the last couple of years, we've had a lot of fire smoke from California, Washington, and also, in Oregon. And I know that hasn't increased people wanting to know, okay, now we know that can happen to us. Now, well, how can we, we're vulnerable. So how can we be less vulnerable? And that's what you're doing now. And people are more enthused about it than what they were 2-3 years ago. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's a great point, Greg. You know, the awareness is way up, and then we've got so many tools right now to talk about anything and everything, from the prescribed fires that are happening out there to the smoke impacts. And that, you know, so we're often promoting that Central Oregon Fire website, along with the Deschutes alerts being signed up for evacuations. And, you know, what goes along with that is making sure that we're clear when we do converse with folks, that they know the differences between the two, that they're not confusing going to the website and thinking that they're going to get an evacuation notice. Make sure that they do know that they need to be signed up for the Deschutes alert. And it's kind of fun to see, you know, that's when we talk about that bigger picture of everything that's happening in Central Oregon, that smoke awareness is a really big piece of that as well. Having an avenue where people get information, but also be pushing the envelope of what's the next step of keeping people informed and understanding. Yeah.
All right, well, looking at our time, I think we did want to put out maybe that call for folks that are interested, right, Boone? Were we still looking at the 28th?
We are.
Or time to be determined?
Yeah,
I guess for the larger group, what we're looking at is we try to convene folks from the steering committee between now and the January meeting to get your take on areas that we've been focusing on, areas that we should focus on, areas that we might stop focusing on. Just get some collective input on that, and then bring it back to the January meeting with a program of work for 2022. And due to kind of limited availability and other things that are going on, we don't really have time for a poll. So I think we were going to open it up to a time and date. And if y'all want, whoever is available and has interest in providing that input can come.
Yeah, I'm hoping that when we do the meeting 28th, 29th, there we'll be able to be a little bit more interactive. We've got a couple of different exercises planned to kind of be able to break some of those components down and make sure that we're taking a thorough look at it. Yeah.
Okay, so look for something here shortly from Boone. And if you're interested and can come, we'd love to have you. If not, we'll have that full larger group conversation at our January Project Wildfire meeting. So either way, you'll have a chance for input and discussion, and look for a little more information on that. So I think with that, we'll switch gears here in our meeting. And it won't be too big of a shift, actually, ending up talking about this Senate Bill 762 and some of the grant opportunities that are out there, both for Firewise Communities and also this large landscape proposal that we're pulling together. Another component, and it's there's a lot of components to Senate Bill 762, but an additional component to that is the Oregon Youth Corps opportunity that is still being formulated, but the Oregon Conservation Corps has received a piece of this funding from Senate Bill 762. I believe it's $10 million. And we have a local organization here, Heart of Oregon, that's looking at a project proposal for some of those funds. And so Laura's here to talk a little bit more about that. So I will turn it over to Laura Handy with the Heart of Oregon Corps. Thanks for joining us, Laura.
Thank you so much, Ed, Boone, and to the whole Project Wildfire Committee. Thank you for having me. Happy solstice, foggy solstice. To start out, and I know a lot of folks have cameras off, which is fine, but before I go into my PowerPoint, if you know how to use your reactions to put a thumbs up or something, if you've ever interfaced with a Heart of Oregon Corps youth crew, whether on a fuels reduction project in a neighborhood or perhaps dropping off loads at Fire Free, I'm just interested to see a little thumbs up or heart perhaps would be appropriate to see just familiarity with who we are and interface in the past. Of course, COVID-19 has had some limitations. That's great. I'm seeing quite a few thumbs. But we've actually been back in person programming job skills training since July of 2020 with various pretty strict COVID-19 procedures. Of course, our outdoor work component is helpful for that, but you still have to get in vans and do all kinds of things. So Oregon Conservation Corps is a component of Senate Bill 762. It is new. It is a brand new program of the state government that is going to be oversaw by the Higher Education Coordinating Council. And there's a new governor's advisory committee that's overseeing its implementation that a bunch of corps across the state got together and we all decided there should be at least one voice in that room that represents youth corps at large. So that ended up being me. So I'm sitting on that committee. And it also ended up being Commissioner Phil Chang. I actually approached him at a Heart of Oregon event to see if he had interest, and he seemed to have a lot of interest based on his past work with youth corps and of course, fire fuels reduction along with a lot of our other commissioners, Commissioner Dare I saw earlier today. So I do have a brief PowerPoint. Some of the slides I'll go through very quickly to make sure that we don't get stalled out here. Let's see here, there we go. So I'm sharing my screen. So overall, Ed kind of already covered that Bill 762 is more than you think, right? So in that $220 million, there's a lot of different components, and it's so exciting to hear about the large scale landscape resiliency grant that our community is going to be applying for. But there's also a section of it, sections 21 through 23 to be specific, that establishes the Oregon Conservation Corps. And the purpose is kind of threefold. It's to reduce the risk of wildfire to communities and critical infrastructure, help create fire adapted communities. Those two bullet points align, of course, very closely with your group's mission. And also engage youth and young adults ages 13 to 26 in workforce training. Now, Heart of Oregon's age range is 16 to 24. So we'll probably be sticking with that. We may look at engaging a few more 25 to 26-year-olds under this project. So the workforce development component is a critical piece of this. It's not just funding projects and acres like that resiliency grant. It's funding a whole youth core workforce development effort that includes the projects that they do. So that's kind of very unique about this, in that it doesn't just fund the project days or the acres, it also funds the workforce training components that are needed to engage young adults in workforce training so they can enter the fields like in arborists or firefighting or parks and rec techs. I know that it can be difficult for your communities to hire enough project contractors to do this work. If that's a problem your communities are facing, this is something to get excited about because it addresses the problem upstream and trains more local youth to want to enter those fields and have some skills moving into those fields. So the funding, yes, there's $10 million available between now that has to be spent by June 30th of 2023. One thing that's very unique and I think will be very attractive to some of our Firewise communities is that no match is required by the property owner. And the money actually comes to the Corps, not to all the various property owners. So there's actually, and this is kind of a double-edged sword, there's actually, not the need to exchange money. So we also have to figure out how we make agreements around this when there's no money exchanged. But Heart of Oregon Corps would get the funds to do the projects in communities. So we're looking at our proposal being due around the end of February. So not quite as crunched as Ed and Zach and Russ. Like I said, uniquely, that funding goes directly to orgs that operate workforce core programming, not to the landowners and managers. In Central Oregon, the two groups that are really established and already doing this and ready to operationalize it quickly are ourselves. We've been around since 2000 and have done lots of projects like this. Some of you know we have a chipper, we have dump trailers, we have chainsaws, we have vans and trucks. And it's great because this funding can also help us refresh a lot of that equipment and potentially buy some new equipment. So our community has this equipment for youth corps to use, going into the next decade. Also COIC, and Heart of Oregon Corps is actively reaching out to COIC to bring them into this. So hopefully we can work together so communities can just talk to one point of contact to work with either one of our corps. So we're excited about that because then that increases the number of Central Oregon towns that there's youth corps based out of that you might be able to work with. So this is a lot of text, too much text, but basically it's talking about how we identify projects. I will drop a copy of this into the chat. So if anyone wants to really dig into this, it'll be in the chat and you can read it. But one of the things to highlight is that they do want us, Heart of Oregon, in our application to select communities at risk. So using that Wildfire Risk Explorer map, it is in the process of being updated, but we're supposed to use the current version for now. And also try to find communities that are especially impacted by other challenges, low income communities, communities that have a lot of ELL speakers, English as a second language speakers, but especially rural communities that are not as likely to get support from other efforts. So yeah, you all are familiar, of course, with wildfire projects. One of the things, and in talking with Ed about the landscape grant, this is a time stop motion of us at a Ben Parks and Rec project with our chipper. You can see our crews going to town there, is trying to find where that grant is going to fund private contractors to come in and do the large scale projects that might not be appropriate for youth workforce training, to find smaller projects that support those areas, right? Maybe get closer into those home ignition zones, maybe get closer into those egress, ingress areas of communities, to find where's the right fit for our crews to come in and do projects that aren't otherwise going to get done. So we're not trying to compete with local contractors. We're trying to help local contractors, both training the workforce, doing the smaller acreage plots, the more handwork type plots. We will be able to do some chainsaw work, but we also do a lot of brush cutting, a lot of chipping, a lot of, more brush removal services as well, with some chainsaw work to provide some training, but not to a point where we want to be able to go slow and intentionally with our young people. So of course we're doing good workforce training and we're safe with those young people. So we're definitely not trying to replace the private contractors out there. We're trying to help them train their future workforce and help communities as well. So very typical prescription type language, fine fuels, surface fuels, heavy fuels, thinning, pruning, /treatment, etc. So to get to our strategies, we are currently collaborating with other corps across the state, Northwest Youth Corps, Lomacotski, COIC, to make sure that we're kind of working on best practices together of how to implement this. We really want this to be refunded next biennium in the state legislature. So we're trying to do a good job at implementing it this biennium. We want to collaborate, like I said, locally with COIC. Heart of Oregon Corps is going to integrate OCC funded projects into our existing programs that you may be familiar with. Our Teen Conservation Corps, the Forest Service in the summer, our Heart of Oregon AmeriCorps and Heart of Oregon Stewardship programs are our year-round programs that are based in Bend and Prineville currently. And then we're also going to be exploring starting new, more advanced young adult crews, potentially in new locations or additional crews. We want to really focus on more of a pre-apprenticeship or almost apprenticeship level with that crew, pay a higher trainee wage than like a stipend, really look at like the $15 to $18 an hour wage, and really get those crews well equipped to go into the future and then hopefully funded into the future. So as far as all of you, where do you come in? If you're excited about this, please, drop some message in the chat with your personal email or, your project email and phone number where Heart of Oregon Corps can reach you. We're going to be looking at project identification and prioritization over the next 2 months intensely. We're in need of some advisors. We are a nonprofit and we, don't have, so people like Ed and Zach helping us out and other people out there that have expertise in these areas, we appreciate. We're looking at workforce and technical skills training support. COIC is working on a red card training. We want to look at being able to S212 certify. We want to look at that fire, you know, Zach talked about that 4-hour course. We want to make sure our staff and core members are really well trained on, you know, what kind of scope or treatment we're using on these properties. Eventually, we're probably going to need some support from fire chiefs and ODF around the assessment of treatment as required by the law, because what's going to happen is we're going to treat these things, then fire season is going to hit, and then the people that are supposed to come and assess the work are all going to be out on fire. We're going to run into a roadblock there, we predict. And then just, we want to be connected in the community and promote this opportunity, both to make sure the crews are utilized and appreciated and really feel, wow, I'm really making a difference in my community. I know in past HOA type community projects, it means so much to our young people when the community members come out and give them high fives and thank yous and Gatorades. It just makes a world of difference to our young people when they can see the difference they're making. And then additionally, we're trying to, you know, there's youth that live in your communities that need workforce training opportunities. So we also are wanting partners to cast a broad network to promote this opportunity for young people within communities. So kind of questions for you, and this is my second to last slide. Thanks for hanging in with me. You know, which members of Project Wildfire should Heart of Oregon Corps specifically coordinate with? That's something we'd like guidance from your group on. Who is interested in discussing specific projects? Who might be the ideal communities that meet that equity lens, that really need this additional support that otherwise wouldn't have any access to these treatments? And just two other notes, we are looking to hire some possible project managers or maybe a part-time consultant to help us with this project. And we're looking for people. We're hoping maybe the semi-retired group might have somebody out there somewhere that maybe doesn't want to work full time, but would like to help make sure that this is successful over the next 15 months. If anyone has interest in that, please let me know. And also, as this landscape restoration project grant that y'all are working on goes in and is hopefully funded, I think it's going to be both a blessing because it's, you know, all that work being done in areas that we can collaborate with. But I think we're already receiving calls from some people on that grant of like, oh, we could use Heart of Oregon to do those crews, that project. But I think those large landscape projects are better suited for large private contractors with our crews coming in alongside and pocket communities that otherwise wouldn't be able to get the treatment. So we might not be able to meet all requests, right? And we'll have to, as a community, prioritize where our COIC crews or Heart of Oregon crews best placed with this funding and other funding our communities able to secure. So yeah, there's my email. Again, I'll drop this whole PowerPoint in the chat and my email in the chat. And if you specifically think that your community is a good match for this program and are excited about getting involved, I really appreciate you individually kind of making a note of that in the chat so I can capture that and also pass that on to the staff that are really, you know, I'm the executive director at Heart of Oregon. We have 6 different programs ranging from construction to childcare to a thrift store to natural resources. So we'll be having staff working on this that are just focused on this, and I want to be able to pass on your interest directly to those staff. Ed and Zach, back to you to even see if I have time for questions, because I'm not sure, but wanted to see where we're at. Thank you so much for your time and your attention, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd say we could take 5 minutes or so for any questions or folks that want to express interest or ask questions. I'm looking at the list of folks that are here, even though we're a smaller group than normal, and still see several folks representing communities that might have an interest. But I would open it up to the group if you want to speak up now or reach out to Laura after the meeting. Either way, Dean.
Yes, in the past I've checked in with Heart of Oregon, and it wasn't the best fit for working on individual properties, which in South County are typically half-acre properties. So is the focus still mostly on like commons, areas of communities and whole communities?
Great question, Dean. So this funding is going to open up some flexibility for Heart of Oregon Corps for that regard, because we'll have more money coming in that can fund those crew days that isn't constrained by like our federal AmeriCorps grant or something like that. So this spring, when we're initially just kind of doing some demonstration projects with our existing programs, that may still be a limitation, though our stewardship crew can do private projects right now. And then as we are able to start those new, more advanced crews that I was talking about, that's where that really opens up. If people have interest for right away this spring, please, we're looking for kind of get a broad range of interest and then kind of lay that out over the next 15 months and match where it's going to fit the best. So we do ask for some patience around that, but we really are interested to hear, what do you have? How could that be coordinated? One of the beauties of this money coming directly to the Corps, and if we were doing private lots, it means that we don't have to have an individual contract with every landowner. We just need permission to be on their property and a mechanism to make sure our insurance is in effect, right? So we don't have to have all these individual payments and projects. And but that coordination is still going to need to occur, right? To get permission to do that and be on the property. So we're excited about that. Again, this is just kind of new information, like this is happening. So think about between, April of this year and June of 2023, and think about, when different treatments might want to occur and what the priorities would be. And again, we're going to be looking for those neighborhoods that have the most need and need the most help.
Great. And
Thank you.
your perspective, Dean, is with the Upper Deschutes River Communities Group, which starts Sun River and represents or pulls together multiple neighborhoods, a dozen or more in South Deschutes County. And so they would be a good connection for you to make, because they've got connections in each of those communities, the smaller communities, but they represent a larger landscape. So thanks, Dean, for raising your hand.
And Dean, if you can put your direct email in the chat, that would help me out too, to make sure we circle back with you.
Okay, Bob, I see your hand. We'll get to you, but Thomas had his up first, so we'll just take it in order. And Thomas is for Laura's sake, with OSU Extension. So,
hi, Laura, thanks for all the information. So I realize this is a Deschutes County meeting, but the work you do, does that kind of extend beyond Deschutes County? Specifically, you're mentioning some of these underserved communities, which comes to mind for me, Jefferson County. And though they're a sovereign nation, Warm Springs, I know they do a lot of youth conservation corps, or have in the past. So curious if you have any involvement up there. And yeah, and the last question is, can this also have other objectives aside from, or at least in addition to, wildfire protection, including like wildlife habitat rehabilitation?
So let me start at that last question. The OCC money specifically, no, but we could collaborate outside of OCC money on wildlife habitat protection projects, especially if they're on public land or land managed by a nonprofit. As far as Warm Springs, yes, we have Warm Springs partnerships currently, and we are excited that this funding might allow us collaboratively to expand those. We host Warm Springs COYCC crew every summer that's run, by a tribal member and works on those public lands projects. And I'm in conversation with Valerie Switzler at the tribe around youth workforce development and how Heart of Oregon and Warm Springs might partner further on some of this. Also meeting with Stacy Lacey soon to talk about some Jefferson County, Crook County stuff. So if you're interested in those conversations, I'd love to connect more on that. We're also looking at, in the long term, would consistent OCC funds allow us to have more programming that's based in Jefferson County? Because there's a lot of youth need there and community need. So yeah, excited to meet you, and thanks for those questions.
Good to meet you. And yeah, my email's there in the chat.
okay, Bob.
Hi, Laura. Bob Poley here with Mountain High HOA. Two questions. Number one, liability insurance always comes up when we think about using outside groups to do work. Can you talk a little bit about your liability insurance? And the second question is, are there any fees outside of just the labor, like dump fees, mileage, things like that, that we sometimes run into with other groups that your crew might encounter that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, thanks for those questions. So Heart of Oregon Corps has robust liability insurance with umbrellas to expand the coverage. All our staff and young people are on our safe workers' compensation insurance, and all our vehicles and drivers are insured on our driver's insurance. So we are a well-insured organization. We have a $3 million a year budget. So we check all those boxes for you. We do have to look at, usually liability insurance is activated by a paid contract. So if we don't have a paid contract, we have to figure out how we make sure our liability insurance is activated. We might have to create like a dollar contract or something. I'm working with my insurance agency right now to make sure that that can occur. Because the insurance world works on money and contracts. And if there's not money being exchanged, they're like, well, there clearly isn't any valuable work happening. So, and then the second question, sorry, remind me again.
Other fees that might.
Other fees. So we'll have to look at that, but we right now in the future, depending on how, past 2023, depending on how the state funds this long term, perhaps right now, in the core community, we're saying, wow, we're going to have to really hustle to utilize and spend this money to prove to the state that this is a worthy investment. So we're anticipating being able to cover all those types of costs for these high needs communities.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, anybody else with something for Laura?
And I'm presented to the Oregon State Fire Marshals, the Central Oregon Association of the Fire Marshals just last week. And I'm in touch with Heather Miller, which I'm very excited to make her acquaintance. Actually, Heather and Stacy Lacey and I are meeting next in January. So please be patient with us between now and the end of February as we wade through getting our proposal in and, really outlining what this is going to look for us. I or other Heart of Oregon members will probably be back to this group if we're invited. And we look forward to implementing this in our community and seeing how we can get some boots on the ground.
Great, we're really excited for the opportunity. And I think all this is kind of coming together, even though it's a kind of a mad rush to piece the pieces together. But hopefully in the end, we'll have everything from the large landscape down to the individual landowner covered in some form or fashion. I know there's other funds out there with the Oregon State Fire Marshal, and those I think still being figured out as well. But I'm hoping that between all these different sources and funds and agencies that we're looking at a much more resilient landscape in a few years. So thanks, Laura, for your time today. Dean, did you have one last thing for Laura?
Yes, just a suggestion possibly. We're mostly concentrated on the upper Deschutes River communities. We have our own CWPP, but we're adjacent to the greater Lapine CWPP, which affects us, and they're not very well organized there, but there's a lot of work that could be done, and perhaps a connection could be made with Chief Mike Supkus of Lapine Rural Fire Department, or someone else in that area of South Deschutes County.
Great, thank you for that suggestion. And this is key where the CYC partnership could come in too, because we currently don't have a crew based in Lapine, but CYC does, right? So we want to be sure to partner and make sure that we're responding to all those areas, but it also might be able to help us stand up more crew opportunities in South County, or even Northern Klamath County like we do in the summer. So yeah, thank you for that name and suggestion, Dean. Appreciate it. I took a note.
Great. Well, thanks, Dean, Laura. And yeah, there's a couple other chats for you, so make sure to save the chat, or if you can't get it, Boone will have a copy of that. With that, we've got, just a few more minutes left in our meeting until we hit the 9:30 mark. And we got a relatively small group of folks, so I would just throw it out to folks if you have something for the good of the order, good of the group. Now is our chance for a roundtable. So I might just start with David, since I see he just turned his camera on. I'm going to assume he has something to share from the Red Cross, and then we'll go down the list from there for any folks that have something to share.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. There's been a vacancy in our territory disaster program manager position. Many of you may have worked with Kristen Heath. She promoted to a job within the Red Cross broader region. We did just find out we do have a new disaster program manager. Her name is Patty Smith. She comes with a background in law enforcement and in community emergency response team work as a training coordinator and as a team member. So we're glad that she's on board. She has a pretty broad geographic responsibility that covers 14 counties in Eastern Oregon and Southeastern Washington. So that's why there's a lot of us volunteers that cover these meetings, because she's got a lot on her plate. But anyway, just wanted to mention that she's now on board, and we're glad to have her. And hopefully many of you will have a chance to meet her in the coming weeks and months. That's it.
Great. Wow, 14 counties. That's a pretty large area of responsibility.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else have something to share with the group? Okay. Well, Dean.
Yeah, it's me again. We just had a board meeting yesterday for the Upper Deschutes River communities, and we're making some changes, and we have a couple new board members, a couple new officers, and we'll be meeting again next month to see what we can take on for the new year. And we got another grant, which is going to extend our defensible space programs for the next 3 years. It's not unlimited funding, but every little bit helps. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, and congratulations on that, Dean, and to the larger UDRC group. That's great to hear. Okay, last call. With that, I just ask, if you do have interest in joining us with a smaller group next week, look for that message from Boone. I think we're going to maybe settle on the 28th at 10 a.m. If you're available, we'd love your input. If not, we'll see you in January, and we'll welcome your input there as well. And that kind of helps us chart a course for the 2022. So seeing nobody else with a hand up or being off mute, we'll conclude our meeting for today. Thanks everybody for making it on Christmas week, and hope you have a great Christmas, New Year's, and whatever other holidays you might celebrate. And we'll see you back in 2022, if not before.
Happy holidays, everybody.
You too. Bye-bye.